name of the book is Eight Fought to Live, the story of my AIDS therapy group, 1988 to 1999. You can get it for a song on Amazon or Barnes and Noble, and it is so impactful. Florence Rosiello joins us, and this is her experience, and she's telling the tale of, I think, so many people who needed to be heard, needed to be seen, and thank goodness she was there for them. Thanks so much for coming on, Florence.
Thank you for inviting me.
So let's talk about how this came to pass. Because you're a therapist, you were asked to do this. And I guess take us to that, how this all started, how this group started.
The interest in it actually started because in the early 80s, I had lost a bunch of friends to AIDS. And so somehow or another, I put that in the back of my mind and had this emotional draw to Gay Men's Health Crisis, which was this organization set up to help people with AIDS and HIV. And I thought I finished analytic training, so I really felt I've got to give back. I've got to do something. And so that pulled me down to Gay Men's Health Crisis. And so the group started. I had to interview everybody. And I had them for 2 years, and that was it. Then they were gone. And you have these beautiful, gorgeous gay men. Every single one in that group was a professional. One of them was Vito Russo, and very famous. I mean, movie stars. I mean, he wrote books, lecture, everything, international speaker. And people don't remember him now. And that's heartbreaking because he was such a sweet, gentle man who was an activist. I mean, there's so many different qualities that he had, but they all had so much about them. One was a singer dancer on Broadway. One was a social worker. One was an oceanographer. I mean, these people were incredible. They were 2 years. The youngest was 23. The oldest was 45 when they all died. They all died. All of them died within a few months, 1990 actually, it started 1990 to May 1990. That was right. They all passed within that time because initially, in the very first session, one of the guys said, "Nobody in this group dies." Now, back then, everybody died. You could die within a week. Everybody who had AIDS was just dying. And he said, "Nobody in this group dies." And every one of them shifted in their chair as though that was their agreement to not die. And for 1 year, this is unheard of, for 1 year, nobody died. Then it started. And it, of course, snowballed. But they all went, every single one, and now nobody remembers them. So I've been writing this since 1990. Times I would write something, close the computer, cry a lot. Then remember I'm writing, go back to the computer, write some more and cry a lot. So it took me actually 30 years. I've been writing it. So when people say, "Oh, do you remember back to that point?" It's like, well, I've never forgotten it because I've been doing it for 30 years. And finally, a lot of friends, I would read a chapter to friends and they would say, "Write another one." And, oh, I know, it was after I watched the movie Bohemian Rhapsody about Queen, and sobbed afterward for a long time. And I said, "I'm finishing a book. I'm finishing the book. These people have to live again. They have to breathe. When somebody reads the page, they have to have these people alive. They went too early."
What was it like for you? Because, wow, it's so powerful saying nobody dies, pledging, not to die. And you're there and you're the glue and you're practicing techniques, etc. What was that like from your perspective, Dr. Rosiello?
Well, in 1988, I was brand new. So I had just, as I said, graduated from an analytic training institute. So I didn't really know what I was doing. But, you're going to jump in and do it. So I decided to do that. But it was very threatening for me because one of the fellows was a social worker who ran AIDS groups in a hospital that focused on AIDS. So I was out of my league. He knew a lot more than I knew. But I thought, okay, I'm just going to hang in here and keep trying. And at first, I don't think that they really liked me because I'm a woman, I'm straight, didn't have AIDS. And as time went on, and particularly at one point, I broke my foot. At that point, boy, was I accepted because finally I was hurt and in pain. And they could, of course, identify with that. I mean, mine was going to get better and this wasn't. But the softening of the whole group toward me was really incredible. But I had to learn. I couldn't quit. I wanted to quit at times. Sometimes I felt like I was going to totally fall apart because it was so, one day I'd go in and 1 week and run the group, and the next week somebody died. I'd go in and run the next group, and somebody else died. So thinking about that, here I am, I'm working full time, seeing patients, running down to GMHC. And the thought of going down there every week was excruciating. Who's going to be there? How many more empty chairs are going to be in that group circle? And of
Wow.
course, in the middle of this, my mother dies. So now I'm really a member of the group. But at that point, they became so tender and so sweet to me. Um, and they really did thank me afterward. And, the fellow who said no one dies in this group didn't. He waited until the last session and he said, we need to end now because there are only two left. He said, we need to end now. I said, okay. And they said, you're not allowed to run the next group. You're done. I thought, you guys know better than me. I'm fine. I'm not going to run another group. So after that, the week later, I got a phone call from the other remaining members saying that Jason had passed. He waited until the group was over and died a few days later. And he kept his pledge. He
Wow.
was going to die during the course of the group.
Wow. So powerful. And you were there in New York, and people, if you go back to that time, it was a whole different time. There was so much that wasn't known.
Oh my God. Well, they thought that AZT was going to cure things. And they had run tests and a lot of tests, a lot of studies. But it turns out that AZT, yes, it did kill the AIDS cells, but it killed all the cells in somebody. So what happened is you were either going to die from AIDS or you were going to die from AZT. And the thing is, it was 1990, that's when they started to actually come up with something that could prolong their lives. So my men are dead. And they're coming out with something that if my guys had just waited a couple of years, they'd be here now.
Wow. When people read the book, Eight Fought to Live, The Story of My AIDS Therapy Group, 1988, 1990, what do you hope they take away from reading this book?
Oh, that's a really good question. I hope they take away from the book that these were real men, that I want them to identify, actually. I want them to identify with the emotional pain that these men went through and to bring it back to memory because people my age, we were there. We remember what this was like. The other day they threw a book party for me and everybody there was talking about how many people they had lost. I don't think anybody realizes that the level of a plague that AIDS was at that time. They need to know. You need to know. And by the way, the publication is right on the heels of COVID. So I thought, okay, well, this is a good time. Good time
Yeah.
to
Yeah. What a powerful, powerful story, and so much that you've learned and that you're teaching everybody else. And I said this at the top, you can get it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever great books are sold. Dr. Rosiello, thanks so much for coming on.
Oh, thank you, Kate, for asking me. I appreciate it.
Visit us at www.greatwritersmedia.com. Email us at info@greatwritersmedia.com or call us at +1 877 556 0487.